Hello and welcome to the sPhil channel. The video you are about to watch is from the final seminar of a course that we taught in the spring of 2026, called Hegel and the Mechanistic Worldview. The course involved a careful analysis of Hegel's chapter on mechanism and the science of logic, as well as a series of conceptual comparisons with the science of his time, in particular with Newtonianism. The course lasted 9 weeks. During the course of those 9 weeks, we had 7 lectures and 7 seminars, followed by a guest lecture from Dr. Marina Banchetti, who delivered a veritable tour de force on the reassessment of the impact of the mechanical philosophy on the development of modern science, and we finished off with what we call a pro-seminar, which is where the students of the course have the opportunity to present their ideas that were prompted by the course to their peers. What you're about to watch is just one such of these presentations. We hope you enjoy it, and we encourage you to leave any comments.
Yes, I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but I have something of a rough draft.
Perfect. Please go
Um,
ahead.
it'll deal with, as I mentioned in an earlier seminar, I'm a bit hung up on the real mechanical process, so I'll be trying to elaborate a sort of scientific analogy to help me understand it. So, um, on mechanical ontogeny. When Hegel turns from the formal to the real mechanical process, we leave the desert of logic, of indeterminacy and indifference, and the slow and incremental depositing of layers of logical moments, for a flood of new ideas not obviously related to logic at all: strength and weakness, power and violence, fate and freedom. This section, where objects and aspects of the object struggle and overcome one another, is almost reminiscent of the phenomenology of spirit and its master-slave dialectic. Analogy need not be perfect to be useful, as Hegel admits, and he does provide us with the analogy of the bullet in the bed sheet. But it would be helpful to have some analogy for the entire process, not just for strength and weakness. But what could in principle be analogous to a logical process? The process in Hegel's mechanical process is a process within logic, producing a logical result, an incremental extension of the meaning of the mechanical object. It is the process of logic, not a logic of process. But are a process of logic and a logic of process necessarily exclusive? Without being less logical, a logical process may also be the prototype for what it means to be a process in the real world. It may be that in this sense, phenomenology recapitulates ontology. The obvious correlate to a mechanical process, the obvious correlate to the real mechanical process in the real world, one that is regular but still allows for the appearance of what we might call strength, power, violence, and fate, is the mathematical and scientific concept of the Markov process. Markov processes are by far the most important kind of process studied in the sciences. They are, in large part, the basis for our ability to make scientific predictions about the world. For the most part, it is only when a process is Markovian that we can understand it scientifically. A Markov process is simply a process with the Markov property, a process that is without memory. The state of a Markov process is determined at any moment only and entirely by its state at the previous moment. There is now, there is what comes next, but there is no past and no future. In a Markov process, the only consequences are immediate consequences. There is causation, there is determination, but there is no history, no continuity, no temporality. But how can a Markov process exhibit any of the startling features of the real mechanical process? Consider, as an example, Conway's game of life. The game of life is a strictly defined mechanism. Its world is an infinite series of isolated cells. In the game of life, A cell can only be alive or dead, and simple rules determine when cells change from alive or dead based only on the state of their immediate neighbors. The game of life is one example of a cellular automaton, a whole family of algorithms where simple rules that determine the state of isolated cells based only on their direct neighbors lead to surprising and complex outcomes. And they are all, of course, entirely Markovian. But why call it the game of life? Its simple rules, through mere iteration, produce something like the mathematical shadow of biology. Shapes not only emerge and persist, but evolve and reproduce. In observing the game of life, we become logical naturalists, charting the life cycles of a mathematical ecology of thousands of shapes, patiently catalogued by generations of human observers, stable and unstable, moving and stationary, a zoo of forms flickering in and out of existence before us. Toads, pulsars, pentaminos, gliders, glider guns, in their living and dying, unfolding a strictly mechanical view before us that still shows something like violence, power, fate. Another example might be the famous Boyd's algorithm, which, based on a set of simple rules, allows for a completely mechanical implementation of the flocking behavior of flights of birds. In the science of logic, the logical result of the real mechanical process is law, but still the law that is in different subordination, not the immanent law that will form the last stepping stone before the imminent transition away from mechanism. This lesser idea of law Hegel also calls a rule, and that is exactly and only what we have here at the level of the Markov process, rules that allow us to derive the next state from the current state, but in which prior states have no say. If this analogy of the real mechanical process and the Markov process is valid, or at least useful, then there should be some further analogy to be made between Hegel's progress from the real mechanical center, from the real mechanical object as center through the hierarchy of the absolute center and the relativity of the object as center there should be an analogy between all this and non-Markovian processes. But what makes a process non-Markovian? It is not that it is any less deterministic in principle than a Markov process, but that it has history. The next state depends not only on the current state, but on a bounded or unbounded past, a history, a biography. And with this presence of the past, even without the process being less mechanical or deterministic, its future becomes harder and harder to predict. It acquires the minimal freedom of being practically unpredictable. But if there is any light here, it is in how hard Markov processes are to escape. Where non-Markovian behavior appears in the sciences, it is either as a problem, where the superficially non-Markovian behavior can be made scientifically tractable by reconstructing the hidden Markov process behind the non-Markovian appearance, or where the non-Markovian appearance is due to its being a subset of a larger Markovian process that is, for one reason or another, unobservable or intractable to calculate. The further development of Hegel's that law is more than rule, that objects have their fates, is one we cannot enlist science to illuminate. But if there is to be any relationship here between philosophy and science, it would rather be by philosophy illuminating science than science illuminating philosophy.
Are you finished?
Yes.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. That was very insightful. Uh, um, okay.
The advantage of going last is that I could incorporate points that were brought up by other people.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Uh, Philip, you have a question.
Thanks, Paul. That was a really well woven articulation. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Just speculating out loud. It seems to me that Markov processes are made up of states, and that anything that happens in the next state is just entirely based on the current state. And then there are rules. And then I think you must have time. right? Some sort of sequence that defines, this state and then that state. And I'm wondering if rules themselves are states or are they not states? Um, yeah, thinking about that.
It's an interesting question. I don't think they normally be described that way, but I suppose it's not impossible that there's some deeper sense in which you could think of them that way.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to fish out. If we're putting on our Hegelian speculative gaze on it, would they be states themselves?
Are the rules within a Markovian process allowed to change?
Um, I would say no.
So there can't be a change of states that would bring about a change of rules.
No, I mean rules can and usually are conditional,
Yeah.
so that like in the game of life, the transition from alive to dead will depend on if there are X number of neighbors that are alive, then this cell is also considered alive and so forth. But the rules are conditional, but they don't change.
Which fits quite well with Hegel's sort of idea of a rule as different from a law as well, insofar as um, the rule does not sort of flow imminently from the objects, but is something that exists maybe contingently.
Yeah, I mean, like you have this field of or grid of in a lot of cellular automata, you have this just infinite grid of cells, and then the behavior that you get depends entirely on the rules that you impose.
Right. Makes sense, yeah. Thank you. Philip, did you want to say anything else?
No, I'm done. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Bruce, you have a question?
Yeah, I had never heard of the Markov process. This is what would you say? Probability, statistics, what is it? Stochastic?
Uh,
That would
Statistical processes can definitely be Markov processes. They usually are, in fact. Um, but the Markov process itself is more general. So, like,
you know what this remind me of? This is a tool. Uh it's some kind of intellectual tool. So you gonna have you have this process and you can look at it as the present as a unsu, just like a hammer, something in order to do something. But it's going to be for the sake of something that you're doing it for. So in a way, it is temporal, but it's not within. You can look at it as if you're doing it in order to do something, already temporality is involved because you're doing it for some purpose, for some reason. It's going to be temporality, something like a vore off hen, whereupon something followed by something. That's temporality. That's uh, that's my take on it. You can look at it as if you take within timeness out of it, which maybe can't. Would talk about causality, and he would say, if you don't put time in it, they empty. It's empty without time. But the way stochastic, you're looking at it, it seemed like it's a tool where you're putting some kind of input in it, but it's in order for the sake of something. It's got to be for the sake of something, and then it would be temporal. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me that even if the process itself is defined not to have temporality, that the use of the process itself is temporal on the part of the human beings who are using it. It is a tool.
Well, yeah, because time within time is not clock time, but anytime you doing something, me sitting here is for the sake of me being comfortable looking at this lecture. You always in some. You go into the kitchen to eat something. It's always for the sake of something. You until you die. It goes on until you die. Then there's nothing. But everything you're doing is for the sake of something. Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.